Bitcoin is dead. And unfortunately, there are charts like this that show that there is potentially some stalling in the adoption happening right now. There are charts, on-chain metrics that we need to take seriously, even as Bitcoin bulls. This is the Bitcoin strategy channel, so I am obviously bullish long-term for Bitcoin, but we have to look at the bear case as well, and we have to find arguments that support that our bull case might be stronger than the bear case. So I want to look at the critics, at the strong data that the bears have in this video. And one of those charts is the number of transactions on the Bitcoin network. This is a very long-term chart starting in 2010, and we see a quite nice long-term growth that peaked in 2018. 2018, what was that? That's when Bitcoin hit 20K. So the price went further up, right? From 20K to the peak 69K. It went further up, but the number of transactions did not. The number of transactions actually went down. So this is a concerning data point, right? You actually want to see more usage as adoption grows. This is not necessarily what we can see in the number of transactions. Another concerning chart, the number of active addresses. So what's that, right? That is how much is Bitcoin being used, how many people are actively going in and out of Bitcoin. And again, right, we look at the price chart, price went down since the end of 2017, beginning of 2018. The number of active addresses did not see a significant bump up from this. We did see an all-time high during the 60K peak, but this was slightly above what we've seen in 2018. The price went way higher than the number of active addresses. And see how constantly this was increasing in the past, right? A very constant, nice growth. This growth isn't that constant anymore. So what's going on here, right? Why is the price still going up, whereas apparently the activity around the Bitcoin network isn't increasing? This is the first answer to that question. This is the Bitcoin on-chain daily volume. So again, this is the peak in 2018. And this is the peak in 2022. So very first time we actually see growth here. So it is the price that's moving all of this. It's more capital, apparently by the same people that are active, or by the same number of people that are active. In other words, the people that are now entering the space, even though it's the same quantity of people, the ones that are now committing to Bitcoin, they tend to deploy more capital. Or in other words, there seems to be more conviction around Bitcoin. It now seems to be safer to deploy not just say $1,000, but maybe $10,000. And that then makes the number of addresses relatively stagnant, but the capital that's being moving up quite a lot. Simply because now Bitcoin becomes suddenly this investment vehicle. And before it was simply just a random means for payment for maybe illicit activities, right? Silk Road back in the days, or was simply just this gambler coin, more or less, right? Once you get all this capital appreciation, once the market cap of Bitcoin goes up, then there is some security, some safety in numbers. And then you can simply, because of its size, already deploy more. This is what we are seeing here. Now, what about this? This is the Bitcoin miner revenue, and this is one tool to potentially time those tops. So I like to simply just time the extreme bottoms and the extreme tops. And I've made another video around this. This comes directly afterwards. This is when I DCA in, when I dollar cost average in very heavily, whenever we have this bottom signal. And one of the signals I use to figure out when should we potentially sell is when the market is heated. And that is when there is a lot of trading activity happening. And one way to figure this out is how high are the transaction fees. That's what we see here in purple, right? We see how much does the transactions cost on the Bitcoin network. You can also look at this at transaction. Yeah, this is actually the price. The price per transaction. We can see once this peaks up, because there is more demand for trading Bitcoin, for moving Bitcoin, then there is capacity. Then there's simply just a bidding war of who actually gets their transaction processed. That's when the price shoots up. And that's when it does make sense potentially to sell, right? What is subsidy here? This is simply just the Bitcoin inflation that's more or less constant over time. Why is it still fluctuating? Because of the Bitcoin price. So how much Bitcoin gets issued in terms of just the number of Bitcoin, that's constant, but since the Bitcoin price fluctuates, the subsidy on this chart here is fluctuating as well. But this transaction fee, right? This spikes up when there is a lot of excitement. And what I find interesting around this especially is that the extent to which it spikes is relatively similar, right? From the 2018 peak to the 2021 peak. Very, very similar. So this might be a potential indicator also in the future, right? When we see again that the subsidy for Bitcoin mining or for the processing a transaction gets to these levels of roughly $15 or so, that might make sense again to reduce at least some part of Bitcoin exposure. Now here's something that I find very useful. Normally you only see this kind of chart denominated in Bitcoin. Here you now see it denominated in US dollars. It's how many wallets have Bitcoin holdings over a certain threshold. So the blue line over here, the dark blue line, is the number of wallets that have at least $1,000 worth of Bitcoin. Then the red line is the number of wallets that have at least $10,000 worth of Bitcoin. And then we go to 100K, 1 million, 10 million, which you barely see, right? There aren't that many wallets that hold that much Bitcoin. But this is again where we can actually see growth. So this is the reason why the price is going up. From 2018, this number of wallets that hold at least 1K worth of Bitcoin went from 3 million all the way to more than 7.5 million, right? So this is a 250% increase roughly, and a similar kind of increase we can see for the 10K wallets. So what's happening here? Bitcoin is not being traded that much. The number of transactions is not going up. The number of active wallets is also not going up. But we can see that whoever gets active tends to move more money. And we can also see that the people that used to be active at some point simply just hold it. So Bitcoin really became a buy and hold investment as opposed to a traditional trading vehicle as we've seen with altcoins or as we also see with Ethereum. Bitcoin is simply just used to park money. So in other words, more and more people can see beyond the heavy volatility, beyond going down 70%. People simply just continue holding onto their Bitcoin because of the lower inflation compared to fiat. That's, I think, what's going on here. And this is why I am still bullish. And we can also see that even technically there is still a little bit of development. The Lightning Network capacity goes up. So in the future, maybe even if we see another doubling or tripling in price in Bitcoin, the transaction fees in the peak might not go beyond those $12 subsidy or so. Because simply, even if the price goes up, the Lightning capacity network also goes up, and this might then, these two effects might balance each other out. But this is really what I think makes this bull case. When you've got very, very strong hands that simply just hold Bitcoin no matter what the waves say. If you simply just allocate, similar to, for example, property, you simply just have a hedge against government overreach and you buy, and even the number of people that come in is not increasing, but the people that do come in with larger amounts and they tend to hold longer, then you've got a case for a long-term increasing Bitcoin price. Once you see this differently, right? Once you see that the on-chain value metrics don't peak to new heights in the next bull run, or when you see that the number of Bitcoin addresses that hold a certain dollar amount doesn't rise anymore, then things get dangerous. Then the long-term holders also are getting bearish. But so far, things, in my opinion, look very, very healthy. And even though we might not see these crazy bubbles anymore, I think since Bitcoin is now being held and simply just dormant in many people's wallets, it's probably going to shrink in liquid supply over time. And the lower the supply, the liquid supply is, the higher the price can potentially go if the activity doesn't suddenly crash but stays at similar levels. The next video is about timing those tops and bottoms in Bitcoin. The two indicators that I like the most, that worked the best in the past. That's in the next video over here. Thanks for watching this one and see you on the next one. Bye-bye.